This is the Develop Basketball Podcast, where our experience is your rise. In each episode, we speak with some of the most experienced coaches and trainers in the industry and tap into their methods of success in player and team development. And I'm your host, Coach Chevy. On this episode, we have Amy Stevens, Associate Head Coach of Memphis Women's Basketball. In her 25 years of coaching, she's had stops at Nebraska, Drake, and Nebraska Kearney, where she was a 4-time RMAC Coach of the Year. As a player, she ranks among the top 5 in program history in points scored at Nebraska and helped to lead Nebraska to its only Big 8 title. Amy was also a member of the 1989 U.S. national team and played professionally in Germany. Enjoy. Welcome, Amy Stevens. She's the Associate Head Coach at the University of Memphis. She's in her 25th year of coaching, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And it has a wealth of knowledge. And just to begin, what was your playing days like? Like, what was it like to get recruited when you figured out that you wanted to play at the college level? What was that development like? And what was that journey like?
Well, it's a little bit different, I think, for it's definitely different than what the
yeah.
And partly because I'm older, and I didn't have the opportunities that a lot of these young athletes have today, which I think that the opportunities they have is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, you basically, you went to the gym by yourself. And my dad was a coach and a principal and eventually a superintendent. So I stole my dad's keys, and then I would get into the gym and I would shoot and ball handle. And we happened to live in small towns in Nebraska where the boys team was really good in basketball. And so Saturday mornings we'd go out and play an open gym from 7 to noon. Middle school teacher would open it up. We'd play in boys and girls. But my dad was by far the most influential for me because he was a coach. And as a little kid, we'd run around the gym, play hide and seek, shoot hoops. And then he'd start working with us on our ball handling and shooting. And so really it was my dad that taught me how to shoot and work with me up until I was about a sophomore or junior in high school. And then I did a lot, really through my sophomore, junior, and senior year, I did a lot on my own. But the fundamentals, my dad really got those established with me as an athlete really young. So I had textbook shooting form because of him and his ability to teach how to shoot. So we moved around a lot when I was a kid. And we ended up in Alliance, Nebraska, and that's where I went to high school. And my dream and goal was to play at the University of Nebraska. I had no idea really what it meant to get recruited. I was the second child of 4, so nobody had been recruited in my family. My parents went to college, but they weren't athletes. My dad played at Doane College for 2 years, and then he became a student coach. So, we just really were clueless. But my dad always just said, Aim, if you work hard and you're a good person, you keep your grades up, good things will happen for you. And don't worry about scholarship. Where there's a will, there's a way. We'll figure out how to get you to Nebraska. So, I just kept working hard and it was back in the day. I'd get up in the morning, shoot hoops. I'd do some running, do some ball handling. Then I'd go mow lawns. I'd go be a lifeguard. And then, the next day would start all over again. That was my high school routine. And then during the school year, during volleyball season, I'd get up at 6:30, go to the gym, my dad's keys, and I'd either bike or get a ride. I'd spend an hour in the gym every morning during volleyball season. And then during basketball season or during track season, I would do the same thing. I'd get up in the morning. And I was constantly in the gym year round, so I was kind of self-developed. It wasn't until my junior year of high school I started playing AAU basketball. My parents would drive 400 miles from Alliance to Lincoln to get me on an AAU team, and so I did that for 2 summers. And I would run track, practice, and then on Fridays they'd drive me to Lincoln. I'd play AAU basketball on Saturday and Sunday or practice. And then my parents would drive me home. And so my parents deserve a lot of kudos because they fed my passion.
Yeah,
they
definitely.
saw something in me and they made sacrifices. My dad officiated high school JV basketball, so he could have extra money to pay for the gas and the hotels and things like that so I could play. And and then through that process, I was recruited by the University of Nebraska. I was recruited by Creighton, and I was recruited by Wyoming. And I was offered scholarships by all the schools, but my heart was in Nebraska, and that was my dream. And so I was a pretty easy recruit because I was ready. They offered, and I was ready to commit, and it wasn't really an elaborate recruiting process. Because I already knew what I wanted to do, and I didn't. We were naive. We didn't know the games or the manipulation or cool 5 visits. I didn't even visit Creighton. I talked to Coach Rasmussen a couple of times on the phone. I mean, Wyoming, I did take a visit because my parents, basically said, you need to have something to compare to. So you're going, they really liked the coaching staff. So they kind of made me go to Wyoming. And then when I got back, they said, okay, you can commit to Nebraska. So that's a little bit about my recruitment, way different than what it is now.
Yeah, a little bit. No Twitter back then.
Yeah, exactly. No social media.
Yeah.
Old-fashioned phone calls. Maybe once a week or twice a month, you might get a call. And then obviously I played at Nebraska and loved my experience there. And then, played USA basketball and went to Germany. And then I came back and finished my school and started my coaching career. So I wouldn't change my experiences. I have no regrets about my college career.
So you had a very, very good set of, I would say, principles or something that got you to wake up early in the morning as a young basketball player. Because one, I think it's a little, not that it's easy ever, but it's a little easier because that blueprint has been given to a lot of kids. There's so many YouTube videos and Twitter things where it tells you exactly what you need to do in order to be successful. Whereas I doubt you had that kind of thing. What got you into that mindset to have those habits or build those habits?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I can give you a really good answer. I just remember as a little kid on the driveway, my dad was working with my older brother who liked basketball but didn't love it. And it's like the little kid with the ball under their arm saying, work with me, work with me. But it was, it was the 70s and girls were kind of into sports. My dad was working with the boys and then they'd go in the house and I'd stay out and do everything he had just told my brother.
Wow.
So somewhere in there, and I don't know if it was kindergarten, first grade, just getting drugged to all these boys' basketball games that my dad coached. We were in the gym all the time with him. And something in me, I just loved it. I loved basketball. And we moved a lot when I was a kid. I went to 4 different elementary schools, K through 6. And I think basketball was kind of a release. It was a way to fit in. And I had that passion for it. So it was always something, if I didn't know people then I'd just go play basketball.
Yeah.
And I entertained myself. And in 4th grade, we lived in Virginia and we knew we were only going to be there for 10 months because my dad did an internship with the National Association for Secondary School Principals. And there I lived on a blacktop. And I would walk 4 blocks, get to the blacktop and play with the guys in 4th grade. And these guys were high school age. I'd be up there trying to get, and I would come home with skin knees and somehow they'd let me in these games. And I just, I was just constantly playing and I just had a passion for it.
Yeah.
So I just think, but back then you just, you girls weren't just playing pickup games and weren't
exactly. Even today, it's not very common.
No, exactly. And so, is really, you just kind of, to be great at that, during that time period, you really had to be self-made. You had to be self-driven. And, there weren't personal trainers, and we weren't lifting weights. Maybe a little, I lifted weights in college, a little bit in high school, but not seriously. And, there weren't nutrition plans. There weren't agility and, performance coaches and life coaches, and sports psychologists, and, there was none of that. You just went out, you worked hard. And I think my parents really instilled the values of, is that growth mindset.
Yeah.
There's the fixed mindset and there's the growth mindset. And I think without a doubt, they instilled in all of us kids in our family that, the harder you work, the more successful you can become. It's not a guarantee. If you work really hard and you have good values, good things will happen for you. And so I just, I believe the harder I work, the better I'd get. I set goals. I had goals, and I worked to accomplish those goals. And I think goals were good motivators for me. That motivated me. There's something internally that motivated.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I think first of all, you said two things. One that resonated with me very much was the fact that basketball was a way for you to fit in. I experienced that firsthand. My dad was in the military. We were hopping all over the place for a little while, and I never processed it that way, but it's so true that basketball is a scapegoat, was a scapegoat for me, one, but it was a way for me to make friends and connect with people that obviously I wasn't close to just because we had moved. So I thought that was really cool. But the second thing is goal setting. And I think that's an underestimated thing that kids do or don't do enough of. I think they have that, that thing right in front of them, but I don't feel like they're very specific about those goals. And I think that's why it's so fleeting for them.
Right. I think goals are really important, and we've kind of gotten away from it, I think, because we're so with social media now, everything is instantaneously, right?
Yeah.
So you go, I want to be just as good with my left hand as I do my right hand. So I'm going to do these 3 drills, or I'm going to do 2-ball dribbling, or I'm going to do this, and then my left hand will improve. And then I could, you can feel yourself getting better as you do those drills to work your skill set. So I'm big on goal setting. I had a goal to play basketball at Nebraska. I had goals. One of the things my dad said to me in high school, and I never forget it, is he said, well, if you want to be a college basketball player, you have to know how to run. And I hated to run. And he's like, hey, you got to go out for track. If you want to be a college athlete, you got to know how to run, and you got to go out for track. And I went out for track. I wasn't great at it. But then I found my niche in middle distance. And I actually was the distance runner and went to state in track and the mile and the 2 mile at various points, not all in one season, but on a relay, 2-mile relay. And then after my sophomore year, because I was injured with a hip pointer, I decided my dad's like, well, that's great, you're running distance, but he's like, if you really want to be good, you should run 400s and 800s or 200s. Well, I was way too slow to be a 200. I couldn't be a sprinter. But I started training with the middle distance runners my junior and senior year of high school. And really, I didn't run in that many meets because I was playing AAU ball. But then, so I ran middle distance. I trained middle distance my junior and senior year. And the mental toughness, and I was running with guys because there weren't that many girls out for track. So our middle distance coach was girls and boys. So I was last every workout. I finished last because the guys were smoking me, but I didn't care.
Yeah.
And, we had times we had to hit too. But it made me more competitive. It made me tougher mentally because I knew how to run, and then it built my cardio and my endurance and my leg strength, and it made me a better basketball player when I got to college. And we did a lot of track workouts during my college preseason days, and I don't think if I had run track, I would have survived or been as good in those workouts had I not had that background. So now as a coach, I always ask basketball players, do you run track?
Yeah, I bet.
Because they all specialize now. They all play in this when you're in schools. And so I love asking that question because the kids that run track, there's always a mental toughness with them that separates them from those that don't. Not always.
Oh, absolutely.
But typically those sprinters or those middle distance or hurdler, you know, like Maddie Simon. Maddie Simon was a hurdler in high school. And
I actually remember that.
Yeah, she was really good. And she had a resiliency about her as a player. And obviously Maddie wasn't a star player. She was a really solid college player and she had injuries. But there was a resilience about her. And I think that came from that track background.
For sure. No, I totally agree. And then on the other side of it, there's a conditioning component to it too. I was talking with Tanya Warren, and she had talked about, you know, some of the things that kids walk on campus not prepared for. And she said, number one was conditioning, because it obviously changes who you are as a player when you're tired. It changes who you are mentally, your decision-making, all that stuff becomes a factor. It drops a level when you get tired. So I could see the track side of it, like you're talking about, that mental barrier as an individual being challenged there is tough because you're out there on an island sometimes with those races that you're out there in.
Yeah, it's you and the clock. You and your mind. That's really what it is.
Right.
Saying, you know, and then, you know, we talk a lot about positive self-talk and, you know, what are you telling yourself? Are you nice to yourself, or are you beating yourself up? Oh, I can't do this. This is so hard. Or am I like, my tank is full. I got this. I can do this. And I think it's just that mindset. So
absolutely is. Okay. So, all right. So now that you had a chance to be a player and you experienced playing professionally, when did you decide and why did you decide that you wanted to coach?
Well, I went to college thinking I'd be a teacher, a high school teacher, and a coach. And then in my college days, I loved my college coaches, and I had such a great college experience. And I had some tryouts with USA Basketball after my freshman year, actually after my senior year of high school, and then after my sophomore year, I made a team. The sports festival team went to North Carolina, competed in the first year. The Dean Smith Dome was built. Oh, cool. That was really cool. And I realized I wanted to work with a little bit more serious athlete. And I love the competitiveness of the college level and the college athlete. And so that's really at that point, I said, you know what, I want to be a college coach. And at that time I thought recruiting would be really cool. And I just had really good role models in college. So that's really what took me down that path. And then because I was on a little bit of a non-traditional academic path at Nebraska, where I left after my fourth year because I hadn't graduated to go play professionally in Germany. When I came back, I was going to go 2 semesters and student teach in the spring, and I was just going to graduate with a degree, but not be certified to teach, and go right into trying to be a college coach. But at the last minute, I got cold feet because I wasn't finishing what I started, and I set out to be a teacher. And I always thought, you know, I need a backup plan. If college coaching doesn't work out, I can be a teacher. So I went ahead then and student taught in the fall, and then things just kind of fell into place because I got a teaching job in October at Omaha South. And then at the end of that school year, then I was hired at Iowa State. So, you know, I was a little bit nervous about doing the student teaching, and then I was going to graduate in December, and then who hires teachers in December? Like, I was really nervous about that. And, you know, I was living on the money I made in Germany, and I was on my own. I was independent from my parents. And so I was, you know, I had some anxiety and nervousness about that, but I just kept working and grinding. And then fortunately, you know, I had a really good relationship with my academic advisor, and she recommended me for this job at Omaha South. And honestly, Chevy, I was a pretty average student. It wasn't because I was Einstein in the class. But she liked me. I guess I have likability. And so, you know, I was taking that woman Pat Sims. I was taking her donuts, and bagels whenever I had my academic appointments with her. And
setting yourself all the way up.
I had to compensate for some of the C's I got in school. So, so Pat Sim recommended me, and that's kind of how I got my start. And then I went to Iowa State, and I worked for a woman who was an assistant coach at Nebraska who I'd played under. So she hired me.
Okay.
And so that's how I ended up at Iowa State. I was with Teresa.
So were you an assistant right off the bat?
I was the restricted earnings assistant.
Okay.
So back in the day, they had the restricted earnings coach, which meant, I think I made $12,000 to coach.
Oh, nice.
$5,000, and I taught weight training.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know. Crazy.
Hey, however you got to get in, right?
Yeah. So I left Omaha South. I was making $23,000 to teach and coach there, as I was a JV girls coach at Omaha South, and I was a teacher, and I took a pay cut to go be a college coach at Iowa State. But
that is crazy to think about.
That crazy?
Honestly. It is wild.
I was at Iowa State for 2 years, and then I got hired. I had to work it to get the Nebraska Kearney head job, Division II head coaching job. I was 25 years old. I got hired, but I was getting ready to get promoted at Iowa State to be a full-time assistant, and I was going to make $32,000 at Iowa State. But I left Iowa State to go to Nebraska Kearney to be the head women's coach there to make $28,000.
Unbelievable.
So I could be head coach. Yeah. So I never. I think my parents were looking at me going, "What?"
What?
But I didn't. In that era, you didn't think about money. I just wanted to coach, and then I can be a head coach. And so I always thought Kearney had a lot of potential, and they built that new facility. The Health and Sports Center was brand new. They were going into D2. It was a really good time to be there. And so I just looked at it as a great opportunity. I didn't really care. I just was coaching, and it was basketball. And let's go. And
that's awesome.
That's how I ended up at Nebraska Kearney.
So were you nervous, like going from being a restricted assistant to all of a sudden now you're leading your own program?
Yeah, it was, it was a little bit, everything happens fast. And then I got hired my first day on the job was the first day of school in August. So I got hired late. They had other candidates. A guy took the job. First of all, they wouldn't interview me because they said I had no head coaching experience and no master's degree.
Okay.
So I didn't even get an interview. Well, they interviewed 3 people, and the one they hired, a week after he got hired, he faxed them a letter of resignation and said, I can't move to Kearney, Nebraska. So then I got a call the first week of August and said, you're one of 2 we'd like to interview. Can you come back and interview? So I went back and interviewed, and then I got the job, and I started like August 26th was my first day. Yeah. So I'm not sure. I think it was finally in about November, I realized that I might be in over my head and I didn't really know what I was doing. But you can't admit that when you're a head coach.
Of course not.
So
no.
I spent a lot of time on the phone with my former coaches, college coaches, and anybody that would talk to me so I could learn. And because at that point it was at Kearney when they hired me back then, this was 1994, I was the head coach and I had an assistant that made $6,000.
Oh, wow.
That's it.
That's crazy.
I had no full-time assistant. I had no GA, nothing. I had a part-time assistant who was really kind of like a graduate assistant. So now I was at Kearney for 8 years, Nebraska Kearney for 8 years. And by the end, I had a full-time assistant and a GA, which happened about my 4th or 5th year. But my first 3 years, it was myself and a part-time assistant, basically.
Wow. So you were brand new to it and you had to be super resourceful.
Exactly. I mean, we were writing and stuffing envelopes and calling
kids.
Email was just coming in, and so we had to figure out how to do that. And it was, we bussed everywhere. And, and we fortunately, I walked into I inherited some players, but then I had a player by the name of Jennifer Warner who transferred from Iowa State. She was basically became an All-American point guard for us. Got her junior and senior year. my second, third year there. And then we had a really good recruiting class. And, you know, we went from 17-11 my first year to 26-5 to 28-3.
Wow.
And then we never, I mean, I don't think we ever lost less than maybe 24, 25 games. And
that is crazy.
Nationally ranked teams. And we did it all with Nebraska and Iowa kids, basically.
Yeah. Did you coach Jessica Kudrowski?
I did. So Jessica, I didn't recruit her, but I inherited her. She was a freshman when my first year.
Okay.
Yeah, I had her, Janelle Moratsky. But Jessica and I, we still keep in touch to this day.
Oh, that's awesome. She coached. Yeah. She was like a volunteer coach for my high school team at Bellevue East. His buddy Carlisle was something was happening. I can't remember what part of his career he was in, but I just remember she had a little extra time, so she came to help. And I just remember she talked about, well, Coach Bleach would always talk about Coach Jess and how good she was at Kearney. But that's crazy.
She was really good, and she's a big reason why we were so successful.
Yeah.
And Jessica was kind of our 4, and we had Janelle Moratsky was our 5, and then we got the transfer Jen Warner, and we didn't lose a conference game in Jessica's sophomore and junior year. We did not lose a conference game. We were 19-0. Maybe we went 17-2 her senior year, but we we dominated. And we and a lot of what Jessica she had the great step through, great shot, 3-point range. I mean, I loved coaching Jessica. She was a competitor. You know, and that was back in the day where we were on the bus, and we had these 10 to 14-hour bus rides, and we'd come back in the middle of the night and we'd watch movies. Jessica's the reason I still have the Sound of Music soundtrack playing through my head, because those women watched the Sound of Music so much. I know it's so cheesy, but so much on our bus trips. It was, I mean, we played pitch in the back, and we would drink Coke and eating pizza after the game. Like, can you imagine feeding your team that? And now, here, have a Pepsi, a Coke, Gatorade. Like, but it was the relationships that you built. Yeah. I mean, I probably have some of my best former player relationships are from my Nebraska Kearney days. Those kids were just, they're not kids. They're all women. They're moms. They're, some of them, because I was 25, so they're in their 40s now, like late, early 40s to late 40s. And so, like, they're just fantastic people. And
I wish I would have. We underestimated Coach Jess. That's for sure. We didn't know. She's so nice and like super sweet. So we knew she could play, but whatever we pictured, it probably wasn't even close to reality.
Exactly, and she was so skinny. Like, she hated to lift, and but she had skills. I mean, she had basketball skills, and she had basketball instinct, and she loved to play. She was really, really good Division II. But she could have easily played Division I. And I didn't recruit her, so I don't really know how all that played out. But she was one of those players that definitely could have played Division I, but made an amazing decision to go D2. Yeah. And I mean, basically in her career, her first year, like I said, we were 17-11, and then, the rest of her career, we lost, maybe 5 games.
Jeez.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember the coach being really upset when we'd only win by 15.
That's how crazy.
So what happened, we were so dominant in those first few years during Jessica's career that then sometimes because we had a home win streak of like 100 some games at Nebraska Kearney. And, but we were up 10 before they even threw the ball up for the jump ball, because people were just psychologically, oh God, we got to go to Kearney.
That is awesome.
We had such a mindset, and there were a lot of things that came into play with that, but it was a really fun experience to coach there.
Yeah.
Really great players. I mean, it was really fun. When you win,
Yeah.
it's fun.
Heck yeah. No, and that's a good example, because I think a lot of kids, they get a lot of pressure, like we talked about before, from social media to pick the biggest, brightest, flashiest school that they can. And they're not really processing what that day-to-day is going to be like. Whether they're going to be an impact player or developing the right system, all that other stuff kind of goes by the wayside when you can get all the retweets and likes on your Twitter post and you commit.
I think I wish parents and athletes getting recruited would, if there was a way to not drink that Kool-Aid of bigger is better.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you could, I always say, whoever's recruiting you, if you've got more than 2 or 3 schools recruiting you, let's say you got 6 schools recruiting you, take the highest level and throw it out, and take the lowest level and throw it out. And whatever's the most in the middle is probably where you should go play. You know, if you've got 1, 2, 1 Power 5 school, but you got a bunch of mid-majors, you're probably a mid-major player. If you've got low mid-major, high D2, and maybe this and maybe something lower, well, then you're probably at low D1. And then you got to decide, well, maybe this really good D2 school is better than going to this low D1. And so, and what's my experience going to be? And am I really going to play? And, and what's my education going to become? And all these things. So, we get so caught up in the material things that come with being recruited at a high level but then kids get there and they're like, well, I'm not playing. And it's all basketball, and there's less balance, and maybe I should have done this. And then you get kids transferring. And so I don't know. But it's hard when you're in I think it's hard for parents and players when they're in that moment to not get swept away.
Oh, absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. And I think the transfer portal is the biggest indicator of that being an issue. I'm not sure what it would have been like back in the day, without all the social media and pressure, but I do feel like there is a less genuine approach when it comes to the kids' experience with their recruitment, because again, they just have so many outside pressures. First when you're it's crazy.
You got to talk to this person, and in the guys' game, it's really bad. In the women's game, it's getting there, but it's just out of control.
I just can't. I can't handle the idea that there are handlers. I mean, nothing against anyone, but it's just a very interesting. As a player, I would not want someone else dictating my conversations with my future, because I'm the one that's going to be there. So anyways,
I think too, I totally agree with that. And I think too many people chirping in student athletes' ears and influencing, they lose that what's in the best interest of this young person. Is it, maybe it's not for them to go to school A, that they should go to school B, because that's a better fit academically and basketball wise.
Right.
Or no, this school's a better fit over here because they have certain things that are more conducive. But I just think, it's just so easy to lose perspective on all that. And then the wrong people start influencing. And I've seen it over and over and over again, where and then you see that player who picks this other school and then they end up transferring. And the transfer portal now is
nuts.
It's crazy. I think there was over like 1,000 last year.
It is. It keeps just going up. Every time I hear the number, it gets higher. And that new rule is going to be interesting too.
Yeah, and I will give a shout out to Coach Flannery and you guys, your Creighton and the staff, because the fact that they have such a low transfer, if at all, like I saw Linda tweeted something about 10 years no transfers or 12 years, something insane. And you're like, is that real? And you're like, oh, it's Linda. That's Linda's my girl. Of course it's real. I'm like, that should be that should be a signing bonus. Bruce Rasmussen,
right?
to give him a pay, like, and that staff, like that is talking, those women are having a great experience at Creighton.
Right.
And that is a really, really good thing. And obviously they're doing something, you guys are doing something right in recruiting, because you're going after values in these players that they're loyal to the program and the coaches, and you know, those relationships are solid, that when things get tough, they don't just leave, they're sticking it out and they're playing and they're competing, and that's not happening. That's like what, maybe 2% of Division I programs, if that, 1% maybe.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. I think once you get going, I think it's easier to keep it going, because you do have, I mean, Plan says it all the time. You have juniors and seniors in the locker room who've been through what the sophomores and freshmen are going through. So you have someone directly to relate to. Whereas if you lose those kids, you lose those upperclassmen, those freshmen are talking to other freshmen, and those freshmen are talking to sophomores where they haven't experienced as much. So it was kind of like a snowball effect, I think, on top of the fact that obviously Creighton's a great school. Flan is like the ultimate players coach, all that. But it helps, that locker room is really important. I know you know that. So that was very, very critical to that stat for sure. Okay. So you said something about, I'm trying to think, like how you process like your new job as the head coach. You know, you had the $6,000, right? Assistant coach.
Younger than me. Yeah.
And then that was your first head coach job, obviously, ever. So you were dealing with a lot, you know, fewer resources than maybe other programs were dealing with, but somehow you figured it out and you guys were really successful. So as a high school coach, obviously they are dealing with some of the issues from a resource standpoint, or, you know, staff is not obviously getting paid that much money. On top of the fact is they have families and they have, you know, their actual teaching jobs. So they're having to navigate a lot of different things when they put their staff together and come up with plans to be a great program. So I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a high school coach, maybe just beginning, and kind of think about these questions as if you were in their situation. So the first one I have for you is, what would your philosophy be with your staff and their roles? And how would you assign their roles, knowing that you have to navigate their personal schedules?
Well, the first criteria in hiring staff that I would look for, one is they've got to be positive, energetic people. Mm-hmm. They've got to, and they got to be excited about kids. If they're not excited about kids, you don't want that person that's just there to collect a paycheck or get a little extra cash because they're coaching. So if you can find, I would rather have somebody that knows less about basketball but loves working with kids and is high energy and super positive. I think that's really, really critical in coaching young people today. Then the second thing I would start to do as I put my staff together was then I would try to be self-reflective in saying, okay, what are my weaknesses as a head coach? Okay, what am I good at, but what am I not so good at? Whether that's organization, or I'm not a good offensive coach, I'm better defensive coach, or you know, I'm going to coach the guards and I need somebody who can coach the post, or vice versa. And then start to say, okay, what can these assistants do and what are their strengths? And then I would feed their strengths with those responsibilities on staff. And then help them grow in the areas that maybe they need to be better at, especially those assistants that aspire to be head coaches. So, so that's really how I would structure my staff. And then, you know, if I'm at a high school coach at maybe a smaller school, or maybe a class B or C or D school, then I'm really trying to get into the elementary schools. I'm trying to get myself shown and visible within the 5th, 6th grade, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, get a little Pee Wee basketball program going, making sure I have influence over my middle school coaches in terms of teaching the fundamentals, teaching them how to shoot, and maybe some basic offensive concepts that would transfer when those kids then get to ninth JV high school basketball. So you've got so you create a little feeder system for your high school program. Now, Class A, that may be more difficult to do in terms of, I'm not sure how the bigger schools in Omaha work with middle schools and if it's open enrollment now. I'm not familiar with that, but if they could do that in those middle schools that are feeder systems to their program, I would be like, do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So that's how I would structure it. As a college coach, I tried to hire people that were smarter than me and that had strengths that I did not have. And especially, I wouldn't say I was a great offensive coach. I was good in situations, and I think our teams always felt confident, down one, up one. What I felt kids were prepared in situations because we worked on situations in practice. And I felt my strength was on the defensive side of the ball. Though in 9 years at Drake, by the end, I had turned the defense over to an assistant because I had that much confidence and faith in him. And I really credit that last year going to the NIT to Kurt Crawford, because he did he was better than I was at coaching the defense, and the players loved him.
Okay.
There's something and so they responded to him, and they gave us everything they had. So, you can't be so insecure or so fearful to turn stuff. You got to empower people when you're a leader. And I think, but there's a level of security that you have to be able to turn things over.
Yeah.
And people have to they have to, when things are turned over, you got to do a good job. You got to be passionate about it, and you got to deliver. So it's, that can be a little bit of a fine line. You got to let them make mistakes. Can't interrupt them every 5 minutes. You kind of got to turn them loose and guide them and support them. And then that's how you get people invested in your program. If I just did everything as a head coach, people are going to get bored and they're not going to be invested in your program. And so I think when you can get that staff investment and buy-in, it's so powerful on a staff. And absolutely. I know you worked on a staff like that.
Yeah.
It shows in your camaraderie. It shows on the sideline. Players know it. And it's more fun all the way around, I think. So I think those are some basic, and I always had staff responsibilities very well outlined, from dress code to, being on time, to, here's your role in terms of your recruiting, your post coach, your offense, your, your defense, your rebounding, your whatever. And we had very specific, every coach had responsibilities during practice. And so, I had to let them, I had to turn, position work. I had to let them run drills, just tried to include them as much as I could. And obviously I always say, well, I have the trump card in that, I could veto, maybe veto is a better word right now in the political landscape. I don't want a trump card. Veto power to be able to, say, hey, let's do this or let's do that. But I never, we always had staff meetings. We went on the court, and if I didn't agree with something, I never brought it out during practice. We always talked about it before or after practice, and we'd hash it out in the office. So when we went in front of the team, we were always on the same page. And
yes, that's really, really powerful, because kids are not dumb. They notice any of those little, they almost look for it. They like, I can imagine high school, because I was that way as a player. You're like, ooh, was that something I just witnessed there? So you got to be careful. And I think that that's really important to it's not the ego of the assistant, but just to their growth, to know that you trust them and that you're giving them something that's really important to your team's success. So I think it empowers them to actually work harder.
I think the reverse is true. If assistant coaches are working. Now I'm an assistant. So I spent 17 years as a head coach. And then, now the last 8 years or so, 7 years, I've been an assistant coach, which I absolutely loved. I loved both roles. There's less pressure as an assistant. As an assistant, you have, I think, better relationships with players. It's easier to have better relationship with players.
For sure.
You're not doing the disciplining or the heavy lifting.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think assistant coaches also, when, I know at Memphis, I get a lot of responsibility on the defensive side, and I work with the guards. But I'm also very conscientious to make sure I'm doing things the way my head coach wants them done.
Yeah.
I'm very conscientious to say, is this how you like it? Is this what you want? Are you okay with this? And I'm extremely respectful because it's how I would have wanted to be treated if I was a head coach. And so I think you can't go rogue when you're an assistant. And I think, and it's a fun, if you really empower them and then they go rogue, you're like, why did I just do that? So your staff is a team within a team. And when you're not a team as a staff, Chevy, you're exactly right. The players will pick up on it. I don't care if it's high school or college, they'll know. And they are so smart and so sharp and so intuitive that I think sometimes maybe we think we could fool them, and you can't fool kids. They know. They're too savvy now. Like they're growing up faster in some ways because of social media, but then in other ways, their emotional maturity is a lot lower than what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's interesting, but they're sharp and they know when things are off.
And that can hurt your program in a heartbeat when they pick up on that.
I think too, and I would suspect this to be true in high school. The higher level you go in college, the more important your staff is, because you get more pay, and so you should have good staff. But I always said when I got to Drake and when I watched Connie at Nebraska, I was like, you're only as good as the people around you. If you don't have good assistants and you're at Creighton or Nebraska or Drake or St. Louis or Memphis, you're only as good as your staff. And because there's a lot more, they do a lot more recruiting. They're just so much more impactful. And I would think at the high school level, the higher level you go, the more important your staff is. Possibly, and if you're at a smaller school and you have a great staff, those schools probably just rock it, because not all the smaller schools maybe have the resources or the people power to be able to have great coaches all the way around. So it's but if you can get a great staff at any level, you have a chance to be really successful, because you can take average kids and make them way better. You can coach them up, you can skill them up, you can teach, and those kids can overachieve with a great staff. And obviously talent is a factor too, if you have great talent, but so your staff's really important. It's really important.
No, it's huge. And I like the breakdown of the energy, the importance of energy over their skill, overall skill, because you're right, with, especially on the girl side. I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of carryover on the boys, but your energy that you're bringing on a day-to-day basis is a huge factor in how much they're going to get better that day in that practice. So if you have someone that's making it a positive environment constantly, those kids are probably going to retain a lot more every day, which is obviously going to lean into their development as a team. So I like that. So when you think about a practice, I'm not certain on the general rule for high schools, but I would assume that they can't practice for over 3 hours. What would you do, and how would you shape your practices? Even just from the planning standpoint, like, would you have your assistants do part of it? Like, how would you go about doing that?
I would always plan my own practices. However, we would practice meet, and then at that point we could change any drills. And then after practice, we would meet and I would ask for feedback, or I would always, during the day, I might say, before I put a practice plan together, I might say, what do you guys think we need to do? Email me your thoughts or come talk to me about your thoughts on what we need to do in practice. And then I'd have my own thoughts and I'd take all those thoughts and that's how I'd formulate my practice plan. Typically, a typical 2.5 hour practice for me on a plan would look like the first warm up, stretch, and then the first segment was some type of fundamental work, footwork, ball handling, passing, warming up, like 3-player weave, or some conditioning with a ball, full court in their hands. They're not thinking a lot, just getting their mind right and getting going. And then the next segment would be defense. Typically, I like to do most of our defensive stuff early and then transition to offense.
Okay.
And then somewhere in there, we always did position work minimum 4 days a week. Sometimes if we could, early in the season, we would do it every day. So each position coach would get 15 minutes and then they would start their, player development segment. And we took great pride in our position work. And, at Creighton, when they were in the Valley and Drake was in the Valley, you have to develop players. You didn't get the superstar all the time.
Right.
So we knew we had to Rachel Hackbarth is a great example. Rachel was a 6'2", 6'3" post player that could not run down and back in 11 seconds her freshman year without dying. And by the time she was a senior, she was the Missouri Valley Player of the Year, and she was a post player, back to bucket, and she had, a Sigma series, she had a face-up series, she had a back to the bucket series, she had a high post series, footwork, and she could step out to the 3-point range. 18 feet, I was really comfortable with her shooting.
Yeah.
And she could rip drive left or right, but she didn't come in like that.
Right.
But we had Todd Voss, and Todd was our position coach, and we had a plan package on how to develop post players, and they followed that to a T. And Rachel did her part, which was her off-season work and extra work before and after practice. And player of the year doesn't happen by not working. And so she made herself a really great mid-major college player, and had a great junior, really into junior and then into her senior year. So that development piece is really my point, is developing your players. And when you're at the mid-major or low D1 or even D2, you really have to develop your kids. And because you don't know, you get that kid that maybe doesn't have a left hand. If she did, she'd be at a P5 school. You get a 6'1" kid tweener that, has to develop face-up skills or back to the bucket skills. Like or a 3 guard that can't shoot, that you're trying to get to be guardable, or shooters that aren't great drivers, and so now you got to make them drivers and pull up plays and add something to their game. And so that development component needs to be part of your practice plan. I think in high school too. I would think high school, if I were a high school coach, I'd be doing fundamentals, and then I'd be doing my defensive concepts out of the shells, a lot of shells, because you probably have less time than maybe the college to really break it down, one-on-one closeouts and things. So I do a lot out of shells. And then, and one of the things I took in practice planning that I always thought was one of the best things I ever heard about planning a practice from Pat Summitt. I watched it on a DVD about practice planning, and she said, you do your staples every day. So like, for example, if you have motion offense, you're going to do motion offense every single day. And what's your zone offense? Every single day. What's your man defense, zone defense, whatever your press attack. Like, we sometimes struggle. So this was influential for me with press attack. We started doing press attack every single day, and we did it for 12 minutes. And we had a press attack for a diamond, we had a press attack for a 2-2-1, and we had a run and jump or man press attack. And we had 3 different press attacks. And we start with 4 minutes on our man, 4 minutes on our zone, 4 minutes on our run and jump. And then, it started 5-on-0, and then we throw a diamond press, a 2-2-1, and then a junkie man. And then pretty soon we were doing those things every day for 12 minutes. Boom, 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 boom. Mm-hmm. And by the time because that became one of our staples, we did not want to not be able to handle press. And so that to me was like, what are your staples? Do them if you're going to play a lot of 3-2 zone and man-to-man, then that should be in your practice plan every single day. And it doesn't have to be 20 minutes. Maybe it's 7 minutes. Maybe it's 10 minutes. I don't know. Maybe depending on the amount of time. Every day is different. So, but we started that early in, October, and just carried that through. And then it just shortened. The time would just shorten as we got into season.
Gotcha.
And the other thing we did was early from October, November, December, and mid-January was a lot more defense. And then in January, we'd shift to way more offense. Okay. So we wanted to be ahead in our defense and behind in our offense. And I don't know if that's good or bad. It probably just depends on your team. I'm working for somebody now who's much more offensive minded. So there's good and bad to both. So you got to find kind of what works for you and what your philosophies are and things like that. Sure. So I was much more defensive minded coach than I was offensive minded.
Okay. So yeah, we're definitely the complete opposite.
Yeah.
So if you're a high school coach getting that practice plan together and you're kind of putting your staples in, like you're talking about, typically a school or a team only has like one primary scorer, maybe two. In talking about that development aspect, because every single kid there isn't there who, wants to play at the college level. So you're dealing with a handful of kids who really want to play at that next level. How do you come up with a development, plan for kids like that? Or do you focus on those 1 or 2 kids who are your primaries? Maybe instead of going for an hour and a half, 2 hours of practice, you know what I mean? You try to manipulate your time with those kids.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think when you have limited scorers on a team in basketball, it's really hard. Mm-hmm. Especially, at the college level, because people won't guard those people.
Right.
And so you have to get creative in ways to score. So I think, in high school, I think I would do it, when I was at Drake, I ran a lot of sets, and I think I would do it differently now offensively. I think I would have a motion offense complemented with sets. And I would want my other players to still feel like they can score the ball. However, in situations, I would also want them to know exactly where we want the ball and who gets the ball in situations.
Right.
It's not free for all. If we're going to a big on the block and they get slammed with a double team, then they have to be able to make that read and kick it out. Mm-hmm. And if somebody, is wide open and it's their shot, then they got to take that shot. I'd be okay with that shot. So I think, you have to, it's a fine line, because if you try to run like I did at moments, 20 different plays for Jill Martin, people will start to really, you go, okay, if you shut down Jill, you beat Drake. And so you've got to, you still have to create a little bit of balance and keep the interest of the other players.
Right.
And I think as a high school coach, you have to be even more clever about that, because, you also have to high school coaches have to deal with parents, deal with more, kid issues. I just think they have way more to, I really admire high school coaches, because they have to manage, I think sometimes more than college coaches had to.
Yeah.
In some sense, because of the outside forces that be. So I don't know if I'm really doing a good job of answering your question. I just think you have to disguise and be creative, and because there's different ways to get the same person the ball, but yet you've also got to find the strengths of your other kids and put them in a position to be successful. And I think whether that's maybe, one year, I think it was when you were playing, Chevy, we were playing you guys at Drake and Creighton, and we lost. We got all these injuries, and we went to the flex offense. Like all of a sudden we scratched everything we were doing. And in January we went to the flex off. I don't know if that was during your era or not.
I feel like it sounds very familiar. I feel like I remember running into.
We started running the flex offense, and you know, and that offense got us to the NCAA tournament. And we put in new wrinkles because we had one kid who could shoot the three. So we
Lindsay,
said we're gonna run it, Lindsay Wharton. We said we're gonna run it inside 18 feet as fast as we can run it. And then we put a little ball screen back pick.
Yep.
And we caught people. We had an element of surprise because people were like, "What? We didn't see this." And then, but right, what's flex? Layups and elbows. And then we just shot elbows and layups. You know, Lindsay could fade and step back to the three, but that was really our only three. We had a point guard that couldn't score, really, a 15-footer. Kanisha Agee couldn't shoot.
Yeah, I remember all that.
Right? We had Tori Runner. We had Brady Davis. We had kind of some misfit in terms of, like, because we were so injured.
Right.
And we said, let's go to the flex. Let's do it. And I know people thought I was crazy, but I was like, we got to get to 60. If we can't get to 60, we can't win, right? And so I know we can go, but can we get to 60? And so that's what we did. So, right, everybody can shoot an elbow jump shot and everybody can shoot a layup. So, and then we just started breaking it down and making reads, and our players were really smart and they picked it up fast, and it ended up being a really Lauren Dibbing was amazing her sophomore year. At the end of the season, she ended up having a really good, actually she was a junior, and then her senior year, she had a really good senior year too. So, I mean, you know, you just try to find things that are the strength of your players and then put them in that position.
Yeah. Cause I think it's easy to have what you think you want to do, and try to force that template onto your players, when in reality you have to watch and learn about them and figure out what's going to be the best for that group of girls, or boys.
And I think I think you're exactly right. And I think, you know, I found myself as a coach being that coach that took our kids' strengths and tried to put them into an offense. So I wasn't a motion offense coach. And we did, because I felt like recruiting at Creighton, you guys did such a good job recruiting for that system. It seems like, where we recruited, but we just recruited what we could get. More or less, we would try to get obviously the best players, but then we'd get this kid that maybe, you know, couldn't drive left, or didn't have a great outside shot, but they were a great defender. Like Kanisha Agee was a great defender.
Right.
Monique Jones, a great defender.
Right.
But not great. Maybe we had to develop them offensively. So I wasn't afraid to do that. Maybe I did that too much. You can't do that too much because you've got to have shooters. You've got to have kids that can play on the block. You know, you've got to have a variety of things. So I developed a philosophy that, well, we'll create a system for the players that we have, or that we end up getting, because, we didn't get this top kid, but we got this backup kid, and we got to develop this part of her game. And so we'll put her in this position to help her be successful. So I had more of that mentality than say, okay, we're going to, you know, go 4 out, 1 in, bomb threes and wrap around the post. And then, you know, if they can't shoot the three, we're not recruiting them. And so we had, you know, and neither one is right. It's just, you know, in college, goes to, well, how well can you recruit? Right?
Yeah.
The best players,
it helps
a lot. Right. And if you keep them healthy, I mean, if you stay healthy, you can be really competitive. So, you know, so it kind of depends, everybody's philosophy, you know, I think it's something, you know, my philosophy just evolved, and I was fortunate because I coached at a Division II school and it wasn't really under the microscope. And so I got to make a lot of mistakes at 25, 26, 27 years old, and then kind of evolve as a coach. And that's really how I got comfortable coaching in situations. And our Kearney kids were like 2-minute games. We did a lot of 1-minute games, 2-minute games, 2-for-1s. And then I'd be like, well, run this play. Oh, coach, we don't like that play. Okay, well, what play do you like to run? oh, okay. All right. Well, then I started getting by the time I was at Drake, I'd be like, down one, maybe we took a full timeout. I'm like, okay, guys, we got to score. What do you want? What do you guys want to run? I wasn't afraid to ask them, what do you want? What play do you believe in?
Mm-hmm.
And it was amazing what they play. I would never pick. They'd pick and they'd go out and run it and we'd score and boom. So
who picked the 5-point play that you guys had at the end of our championship game?
Oh, that was we called timeout and drew that up, Chevy.
I want to know who came up with that one.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was the basketball gods were looking upon us that night.
What's so funny is I was talking to my husband last night, and I don't know why we started talking about it, but we did. And he was like, what? How do you get a 5-point play? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to ask Amy tomorrow.
Yeah, I guess she released it and then mowed through the screen. Unbelievable. Yeah.
Okay.
June Cordeau was the ref on that made that call. Do you remember that?
I do. I remember that like it was yesterday. Amy, I was in 3 championship games where we lost. Valley Conference championship losses. And I think the combined score or this combined difference was like 4 points. It was a great experience, but that's obviously still a pain for me. It's deep wound.
After we won that game and went to the NCAA, there were so many great people on your guys. We had great kids and you guys had great kids.
Yeah.
You guys pulled huge upsets against Indiana State and Illinois State to get there.
Mm-hmm.
We were, a hodgepodge of injuries and beat Southern, the 1 seed, and then beat Evansville.
Yeah, and, that's right.
It was a really climatic.
It was crazy.
Drake, we had a great crowd, and
mm-hmm.
but I remember Allie Thrall missed those free throws. Like, what are the chances she's going to miss those free throws?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and I just remember I was excited for our kids, and we were ecstatic. We're going. But I called Allie that night. I think it was that night. I got her number and called her and left her a message because I was like, 9 times out of 10, you're going to make those shots, and that game doesn't come down to those 2 free throws. Like,
I can't imagine.
No. Can you imagine?
No.
I still felt so bad for her.
I do. I know. Yeah.
It could have been anybody. We all we all dream of being in that situation, but then you don't know how you're going to do it's just.
Yeah. That was a crazy time. I felt terrible for her after I remember that vividly.
And what I remember in that last minute, I think we had to it was so low scoring, and I think we had to get like 5 defensive stops in the last minute to hold on to win. And of course that was a source of pride for me because I'm a defensive minded coach.
Yeah.
But what are the odds that you guys weren't going to score? Like, it was such a
It was wild.
It was a battle, right?
It was.
When that 5-point play occurred, we were down 10.
Yeah.
You were dominating us, or felt, in a 50 to 55 game, a 10-point lead's like a 20-point lead.
Oh, I know. Right? I definitely cannot get myself to watch it, but just even thinking about it, it was a bizarre game. Very much so.
That was definitely, people say it, I know. They were like, whatever. We're reminiscing here, but I'm like, there really shouldn't have been a loser in that game.
Both teams could have gone. We had they needed a not large bid for the MVP that year.
Exactly.
Make us feel better. Okay, so kind of going back to the high school situation as far as design your practice. You talked about the staples, and you hit on when you were at Drake, you guys went to a flex offense, and you said it was layups and elbow shots, right? So for your practices, were you very, very particular about for instance, if you have a certain set that you're running, you guys aren't just running that set and calling that, the 5-on-0, you guys are good. You guys are actually breaking the pieces down within the sets. Is that right?
Yes, if we had I consider flex a continuity offense or a motion offense or a triangles offense, without a doubt, we're breaking those down and we're doing drill work. And even in some of our sets, you know, if it's a strong side triangle or like a flex cut down screen, stagger screen, flex stagger, we would break those down into 3-on-3 or 4-on-4, and we would work certain things and reads and counters, and we would say, okay, defense switch, okay, play straight up, or switch guard to guard, post to post. So we would teach, that's how we would break those. But, you know, if we're running, so the more breakdown I think you can do. I'm big on whole teaching, whole offense, part whole. So you teach it, you break it down, and you teach it. And then a lot of times with our sets, so our continuity type offenses, we would break down and we do a lot of drill work and reads. And then our sets, I'd just pick 5 to 10 sets for one day in practice. And we'd say, okay, for this 15 minutes, we're going to execute our offense against our scout team or whoever our team is. You know, we might do like offense to defense, or we might do ODO, and we'd say, I get point guard. Okay, point guard, you've got these 5 calls. Or if it's a day before the game, we probably weren't doing a lot of full court. We're just doing half court execution, working on timing, cutting, and, you know, maybe we just run through the half court line and then we're good. So, so it kind of varied, but yeah, we would try to do breakdown drills of our offense, and, you know, a lot of like guards trying to feed the post.
Yeah.
You know, in the early parts of the season, guards are terrible about.
Oh yeah, though I totally agree with that.
Pass the wing, feed the post, and you're like, the ball never gets to the post. It's like, guard, feed the post. You know, can't score until the post touches the ball.
Yeah.
You know, we would do, you know, if we do anything with a ball screen action, then we're doing a lot of ball screen. Like at Memphis, we run a wing ball screen offense. So we do some type of wing ball screen almost every day. Read, various reads, switching, hard hedges, soft hedge, icing. You know, we have a whole series of things, you know, where with post guard work that we go through where they have to make reads. So we do a lot of them.
I would think that would be very, very effective for a high school coach. You know, like even if you kept your playbook simple, but you I like what you said, you break it down and then you tell your defense to show different things. Exactly. And I think that that's critical because it allows for your players to make reads instead of kind of doing the robotic / you know, just kind of lackadaisical reads, you know, like the things that they know are going to be there versus any adjustments that they might see to be able to actually have a reaction. So I think that would be pretty effective for a high school coach to implement something like that pretty consistently, right?
Yeah, it would be. And I'll tell you, one of the best offensive coaches I worked with in my coaching career was Dana Finch. Another Creighton. I don't know what it is.
Hey,
Creighton is so smart. Exactly. I should have gone to Creighton. No, Dana was so good. She was our offensive coordinator at Nebraska, and she was so good. She and Connie developed this whole drill package. They had them on laminated cards, and be switching. Here's our drill package for switching man defense. Here's our drill package for sagging. Here's our drill package for straight up man, no switch. And you know, they had counters, and it was this primary offense. It was a continuity offense. It was slice and slew, and it was a high 2-3 offense. And they just had it down. And we had, you know, we had the 10 scout guys, so we could run we could run 3 baskets of drill work of going over reads and footwork, and it was really, really, really good. So I think the more you can teach your kids, the more you can drill. And then as you get late in the season, you're playing more games, and maybe you don't have to do as much drill work. You do more 5-on-5 things. But I think early in the season, that drill work is really important. And then getting your kids to understand that this is a breakdown of our offense.
Right.
And how that applies. The why component, I think, is really important in teaching. and then especially teaching those reads of defenses. And so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And kind of just to, I guess, make it more, I guess the plays more impactful, the players that you're setting these plays for. So say we're kind of like we talked about earlier, you have the one or two primary scorers. What do you do with them? Because you say they want to play in college one day. And you kind of hit on the fact that you want to make sure everyone's feeling included and important in the offense. But obviously you do need to have those kids prepared to take the brunt of the work offensively. What do you do with those guys as an extra or as something to prepare them for college level basketball?
I know when I was at Nebraska, Coach Uri, some of our younger kids, when they weren't playing as much, they would have to stay. And I don't know if you can get away with this at the high school level or not, and do 20 more extra minutes of running the offense or going ODOs, offense, defense, offense, and they'd go against the guys. So if you can, get that extra 10 minutes, maybe it can't be 20 minutes, but what it did was it got those players extra conditioning. It got them more reps in the offense that maybe they weren't going to get in a normal practice. They hated it, of course. Sometimes they felt picked on. But when a player got injured, they were ready to go. And they knew what was going on with the offense when they were in there. So I think, and that happened, we had the 4 seniors my first year back to Nebraska with like Haley Sample and Emily Cady and T. Laudermill and Brandy.
Yeah.
Those guys had a lot of experience and they had great chemistry. And so we had to get those other, it would have been easy to just kind of put those other players to the back burner, but Connie was really good about having them stay, get extra reps. Mm-hmm. And then, when Rachel Terrio got hurt or then Natalie Romeo was ready to go and Jazz Sincord got some really quality time down the stretch. And there were some really good things happening because those players continued to develop because they stayed extra and got those extra reps.
Right.
So
yeah, it's crazy what the little 10 minutes will do every day.
It is. And I talk a lot about the accumulative effect.
Yeah.
With our current team, like we do I'm in charge of the ball handling before practice or after we warm up stretch. I always do some ball handling, dribbling. And I'm like, don't waste these 3 minutes. We got 3 minutes and I want the 3 best reps or the 3 best minutes you can give me right now. Don't turn your goal next 3 minutes. Don't turn the ball over. So I'm always constantly challenging them because I'm like, by the end of the week, we're going to put 20 minutes of ball handling in and you're either going to get better or you're not.
Yeah.
And not getting better is not. And so you think, 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden that's like, times 4, that's 80 minutes this month we spent on ball handling. And then that's 160 minutes. And I mean, all of a sudden you put in hours of ball handling and it started with 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So, it's a cumulative effect.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And I think that's powerful from the standpoint of just understanding like how hard you're going is going to get compound, like you're saying, cumulative effect, compound effect. That stuff it pays off in the end because that stuff gets easier and you can go harder and harder and harder. And it's huge for development. Okay. All right. So for your leadership, you kind of like we talked about, you said, make sure that those 2 kids are the hardest workers. And sometimes your primary scorers aren't the best leaders. But what have you done or what have you noticed has been the most effective in building leaders in your locker room that you think could be applied to a high school program?
Well, we always say whoever runs the locker room runs the team. Mm. So you've got to know as a coach who's running your locker room and what's the culture of that locker room. And then when you do pinpoint your leaders, I just think as a coach, it's imperative that you spend time with those players outside of practice, building a relationship, getting to know them beyond basketball, and then start planting those seeds of what you want your culture to be within your team and what are those core values. So if I was a high school coach, I'd have 3 to 5 core values. 5 might be too many, but I'd have 3 to 5 core values. And then I'd just start working those players over about these are our values and include them in how do you think we can incorporate this in our practice, and how can you guys lead these values within our team and talk about them, and they should know them and they should be able to recite them. And I think and that just takes time. It takes time, and it's relatable. Coach giving them relatable examples and fun examples, things that interest them. So they look forward to coming to see you 8th period to talk about whatever it is you're going to talk about. And in the beginning, I wouldn't talk about anything except them and their family and their goals and how school's going, you know, what's your boyfriend's name and whatever, how's this or how's that. And then from there, I would start to progress into, you know, tell me what you want from the season and what's that going to look like and how do we work as a unit and what challenges do you guys see and how are we going to, you know, get through those challenges, and just include them in every single discussion, and just continue, and then give them responsibilities in practice. You know, you're leading stretches, you're running the ball. Like when we do just stationary ball handling, I don't run the ball handling. I always bring a player out to run the ball handling. So any chance you can put that player, or I'll say, Maddie, make 2 teams, give me 2 even teams. The more we can put them in leadership positions to run the team, the better. So I would just find anything and everything leadership wise, and it's all over the internet. You can just Google leadership, you know, or John Maxwell or I can't think of his name. John
Gordon.
Yeah, John Gordon, exactly. Like he's all over the place. He's got, I steal all his stuff. He's got great things on leadership, and you know, I think it's probably harder at high school to find relatable examples, maybe in basketball, because maybe not all the kids are watching the NBA or the WNBA or even college. So, but they don't necessarily have to be basketball. Leadership doesn't have to be basketball related. It can be other examples. It can be an inspirational story. It can be, you know, it can just be anything really, that a coach thinks will connect with young people. And but it starts and stops with the relationship that you can build with those kids, and that building that trust. And if you can get that to be genuine and authentic, then I think, man, you're going to definitely be headed in the right direction.
Yes, so, I totally agree with that.
You know.
Okay, so we're kind of hopping back to the staff and roles from a scout standpoint. So you're scouting other teams. Put yourself again, obviously, in the shoes of a high school coach. How would you divide up the scouting roles? Would you just take it all over yourself and kind of just do it a collaborative effort, or would you kind of divide it up? How would you approach scouting and make it the most effective with their time?
Well, if I was a high school coach, depending on my staff, if I had a really good staff, I'd probably divide it up. And then, including myself, I wouldn't just divvy it out. I would also be included in that. And then, you know, and then once they've scouted, come back, discuss. And I don't know if I assume they don't exchange game film in high school, or they
kind of do. They do. There's a huddle. So they all post all their stuff on Huddle.
So I probably now, I mean, just for time and family, I'd probably watch a lot of Huddle. I'd probably do it all on Huddle. If all those games are on Huddle, I'd watch that. I don't know if high school you can really, probably depends on how good your team is. That, you know, if you've got a better team, you probably can do more prep and they'll grasp the concepts of things that you're doing. But I also think too, you know, get good at what you do. Sometimes I think we focus so much on what our opponent's doing. I think you need to be prepared for things like presses. Are they going to run man? Are they going to run zone? But if you're doing those things, if those are like a press attack and a zone offense and zone man offense, if you're doing those things every single day, that's part of, to me, that would be, if I was a high school coach, that'd be 3 of my core staples that I'd be doing. Then you're going to be prepared for even when you don't know somebody throws something new at you.
Right.
So
right.
obviously scouting helps you that much more, but I would definitely use huddle and I would divvy it up, but I'd also watch. I mean, I think as a head coach, you have to watch a lot of film.
For sure.
But I also think, a lot of high school coaches have families and kids. And so I think, assigning some scouting responsibilities to your staff is really important.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the college level, we rotated it with 3 assistants rotated. But I had to watch a ton of film.
Yeah.
And that was for me. I wanted to feel prepared. I wanted to feel like I knew what I was talking about when I delivered something to the team. So I tried to empower the staff. The staff presented all the scouts and things like that. But on game day, I needed to feel like, okay, I think I needed to have a good handle of what, a team was going to run. So
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's important. In any leadership role, you need to be the hardest worker. I mean, I don't think head coaches can be lazy. I think the head coach has to set the tone and has to work just as hard as their staff.
Yeah. And I like what you talked about, because I think that, you get in the college mindset where it's film, prep. And you got more time for that because it's all you're doing.
Right.
But as a high school coach, a way that you can kind of negate that and not have, your day filled with watching film or your nights filled with watching film, you can, like you said, have your staples, and that there's only so much high school programs can do, so if you're press attack ready and your defense is solid and a lot of that stuff is negated, the stuff that you don't have to prepare as much on film, you can get the general and still be pretty successful.
And I think they're a little like, you don't know if somebody's going to throw a 1-3-1 at you or a
Yeah.
half court trap. But I just think it goes back to those staples. I think those one of the best things that I wish I would have learned earlier in my career.
Mm-hmm.
These things, because sometimes I would just wait. I would wait to the week before, 2 weeks before, or I'd only run zone offense if I knew an opponent was going to run zone that week. So then that week we'd run our zone offense. Where let's say we're playing 2 teams in the weekend and they're playing man. Well, we run man, but we're still going to run zone, because if we kill them in the man, they might go zone.
Yeah.
Even though they're pretty much man teams. Like, we knew Creighton was never going zone, but you never know, right? You never know. Like, you want to, and I think that helped us be better earlier in the season once we started going to that, because we were better at running our zone. We were better. In fact, I just got our head coach at Memphis. We've already got our man offense in. We got our zone offense in, and we've already got our zone defense in. So I'm like, now we can break it down and we can get more reps, and we'll be better in November, or now December.
Mm-hmm.
We started it early.
Yeah.
And, versus waiting and not getting maybe the reps and not being as good at it. So
yeah,
I like that. Yeah, I love that. And but it's hard because you're like, oh, we got so many things we got to get better at, and
right.
But that'll come as the season progresses, I think.
Right. No, I like that a lot, because you're putting more ownership into your development as a team versus depending on some, scout things that are going to go like this. Exactly. You're building more consistency with your program. I like that a lot. Okay. So now this is the last question. You got to give one of your funniest stories that you've ever had at the college coaching level, whatever level. It could be Omaha South, who knows? But you got to tell one of your funniest stories. It could be a recruiting story. It could be in a game, whatever you think of.
Oh my gosh. funniest appropriate stories. Oh gosh. Funniest coaching stories. I have a lot of stories. When we were playing in the NCAA tournament, and we had a mixed staff, male, female staff. And the players it was 5 minutes to go, and we had just done our last hurrah speeches, all that. Players went out on the court. We're playing Tennessee, and we're nervous. I mean, the coaching staff, we're playing, Pat Summitt. They're ranked number 1. They got Candace Parker.
Jeez.
Anaseki guarded, was 6'5" and guarded our point guard. Couldn't see around her. But with coaching staff, so we're in the locker room, and everybody's got to go to the bathroom before we, because we're more nervous than usual. And I have my head down, and one of my assistants forgets to lock the bathroom door.
Oh,
so there's doors, and I had my head down, and I went kind of head first into the door. Fortunately, he was standing up and had his back, but I hit the door hard enough that it kind of and then I realized that it was this male assistant. And of course, I don't scream. I'm not a screamer, but I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then, scooted over, and we started giggling about that, and we could not stop laughing. And so we have to, now we're almost late getting on the court because the time's running down to 20, 10 seconds, whatever. And so to this day, this assist, I won't say his name, but we still laugh about that because he was so nervous he forgot to lock the door. I was so nervous I had my head, I wasn't paying any attention. It was like, it was the blunder of all blunders. And
that's hilarious.
Of course, across, the male, female thing and all that
yeah.
stuff. But that was pretty funny. And
yeah, Tennessee, I'm sure will do that to you.
Yeah, Tennessee has a chance to do that. Now, we did a pretty good job in the first half. We were only down 13 at half, but then, they came out the second half, and I think they got a pretty good butt chewing at half, and they came out the second half, and I think we didn't score the first 12 minutes of the second half. But it was a great experience, and it was pretty awesome to be in the NCAA tournament.
Heck yeah. I would take that I would take that all day.